Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. We are providing some bonus content for you today as I am here to give you the definitive tier list of the best draft formats of all time. With a caveat, this is all my opinion, and we're only ranking sets I actually drafted. I took a long break from Prophecy until Scars of Mirrodin. I didn't play Theros Beyond Death because you couldn't draft with people on Arena until then. And there was a series of time where I wasn't drafting at all, even though I was playing. So I basically drafted Mirage and Ice Age blocks, and then got into Constructed, and then eventually stopped with Prophecy, and then came back. So some of these I'm not going to remember. Some of them I will. This is actually an interesting one to be right up front because Weatherlight was actually, in my opinion, the set that set Magic on a case that made me not want to play it for a long time. Prior to, let me move this up so you can see both of them. So, like, there's some stuff going on here in addition to just how the draft format was. Mirage Block was really fun, and then Weatherlight came out and it ruined all of it. In addition, it took the story from a situation of, hey, let's visit a new plane and have some fun, to here's some characters. If you like them, good news. That's what Magic's about for the next 5 years. If you don't, sorry, you're not getting anything but this. So from a pure fun level, I think Battle for Zendikar was actually better. It had a better story, and it had better gameplay. Battle for Zendikar, easy winner. Ixalan versus Mirrodin Besieged. Okay, so Mirrodin Besieged was the second set in the new Phyrexia cycle. What's up, MTGZ? Glad to have you. From a pure Team Sealed perspective, Battle for Zendikar was great. This is kind of a no-brainer for me. I had a lot of fun drafting Mirrodin Besieged. I did not have much fun drafting Ixalan. Like, I don't think we even need to discuss this. I doubt many people would rank Ixalan over much. Scars of Mirrodin over Oath of the Gatewatch. So I did well in Oath of the Gate. Oh, I gotta undo that because I clicked the wrong one. I did well in Oath of the Gatewatch. However, from a pure draft perspective, I think it had some problems. And the problem it had was that Black-White was so overpowered that that was literally all you were doing. When I was drafting this, we were still back on the MTGO days, and all I had to do was force Black-White, and I could get consistent 2-1s with a 3-0 here and there. I think we ground up to something like 100 excess tickets playing Oath of the Gatewatch and just forcing Black-White, and that wasn't particularly fun. It was neat that I got to win a lot, but it wasn't fun, whereas Scars was actively fun. Kaladesh versus Born of the Gods, this is no question for me. Original Theros block was actually pretty fun. All of the expansions for Theros were not. And Kaladesh is up there on my list of good formats. Core Set 2020 with Elementals versus Core Set 2014 Draft Blue, lol. I didn't love either of these. But at least the Elemental one had a lot of different things you could draft. Whereas I do remember the 2014 set was literally just draft blue. Fate Reforged versus the Exalted core set. I have fond memories of this Exalted core set because that's where I got involved with Mana Deprived and first started doing my Magic videos. The first episode of Men from Moto ever was Kenji, Josh, and KYT arguing over a card from core set 2013. But Fate Reforged was more fun to draft. And I have good memories of this too. Like, I went to a GP in Montreal and played this with Marty. But, like, I don't remember much fun being had really in any of the core sets. War of the Spark versus Dominaria. This one's really tough for me. Because I think a lot of people have Dominaria on the top of their list. I think one of the things that made Dominaria so good was that it came after Ixalan and Ixalan, because Rivals of Ixalan was the same set as Ixalan, with just some bomb rares snuck into the packs. War of the Spark was very ambitious, and it had a lot of cards that I liked, but I think as a draft set, Dominaria was just better. I also think it would have been better with Evolving Wilds in it. Like, lol, here's a stupid amulet that taps to fix you is not acceptable. But it was slow, it was grindy, it was bomby. Yeah, Dominaria was with Slimefoot. I think I had more fun in Dominaria than War of the Spark. But this was not a huge one for me. We're set 2019, Bots Don't Draft Auras. I remember that one. Versus Rivals of Ixalan. Oh, God. This is like pick your poison. These were both not formats that I enjoyed. They were actually the same format. I guess I preferred the one that had less bomby cards in it. Eldritch Moon versus Journey into Nyx, no question Eldritch Moon was better. All of the Theros expansions just made Theros worse. Eldritch Moon was quite fun. Aether Revolt over Avacyn Restored easily. I didn't particularly enjoy Avacyn Restored. I think I did something like 5 Avacyn Restored drafts and then just stopped drafting until the set rotated. Tempest versus Dark Ascension. Whew, lordy, that's tough. I'm of the opinion, and I realize it's a narrow opinion, that Dark Ascension made Innistrad significantly better. Because by the time Dark Ascension came out, the jig was up. Everybody already knew what was going on in Innistrad. And you weren't getting the Spider Spawning deck, you weren't getting the Burning Vengeance deck. So getting the tribal lords really breathed new life into a format that was dead and kind of boring. However, Tempest was pretty revolutionary, introducing new mechanics, new creature types, and was just a blast. Yeah, you got Spirit Lords, you got a little bit more focus for the decks, and like some actual payoff for being in the tribes. I think Tempest was still better, though. I think that what this did to a draft format I didn't like was more impactful, but I think if somebody's like, hey, we're going to draft Dark Ascension or Tempest, I'm going to the Tempest house. Return to Ravnica versus Innistrad. I don't really like either of these. A lot of people have original Innistrad on their list, and it's because they're viewing it through the lens of when they first discovered it. Good morning, Chris. When they first discovered it, it was cool, because there were decks they knew about that no one else did. But if you go back and do a flashback draft of Innistrad, you don't get those decks anymore because everybody at the table knows about them and is fighting for them. I had a lot of success in Return to Ravnica, but I didn't love it. I think because Innistrad was so much fun for about 3 weeks, I'm going to give it an edge over Return to Ravnica, but neither of these are on my "oh my god, we did it" list. Hour of Devastation over Visions. This is one of my favorite draft formats of all time. Visions was good, and it added good things to Mirage. It's unfortunate that it's paired against Hour, but nothing to go here. Dragon's Maze versus New Phyrexia. I've, for a long time, considered getting a Phyrexian tattoo, and it's possible that when COVID is over and it's safe to do such things again, that I might just do that. My GP top 8 was in Dragon's Maze, so I have some fond memories of Dragon's Maze. But yeah, if we're ranking this from a fun factor of the draft, Dragon's Maze was more fun. New Phyrexia was not necessarily more fun. Dragon's Maze had things balancing about which guilds you were going to get into, and it rewarded you for the knowledge of this guild is in this pack, which is going to be coming from this side, and you really had to plan things out. Whereas New Phyrexia didn't really lead to fun gameplay. So I'm going to go with Dragon's Maze over Phyrexia, even though I love the Phyrexian flavor. Dragons of Tarkir, Modern Masters was terrible. It was the most drafting on rails I've literally ever seen. Once you figured out what color pair you were in, you just took the card for your color pair and moved on. Not interesting at all. Dragons of Tarkir was fine, a bit overpowered for my taste, but fine. Origins versus Stronghold. Tempest Stronghold Exodus. All of the sets that I've drafted, Orcish. And at the end, we will find out my definitive tier list. It's going to take a little bit, but I think it's worth the journey. I had some good success in Magic Origins, but I don't think I enjoyed it. Stronghold didn't add a whole lot to what Tempest was already doing, but it was already continuing a decent experience. Whereas Origins was just like, hey, let's draft some aggro cards. I didn't feel like there was that much play in Origins, so I like Stronghold here. Cons of Tarkir versus Kaldheim. This is tough because Kaldheim's brand new, and I don't know. Cons of Tarkir for me suffered from some of the same things that the original Innistrad did, and that I think Cons of Tarkir had some of the most fun gameplay I've ever experienced in Magic. The morph game was fun. The draft portion was a little less fun for me because once you figured out that there were 2 decks in the format, Black White Warriors and 5-color morph, you just ended up taking all of the dual lands and then grabbing all the rares, which led to not fun for me. I think I'm going to select Kaldheim here because I had one issue with cons, and it's that the morphs were punishing to new players who didn't know the rule. At 4 mana, if they flipped a morph, it wouldn't eat your dude. At 5 mana, it would. And like that was just something you had to know if you were going to play that format and not get blown out. And there was no way to know that without reading all the cards in the set or having someone tell you. So like the fact that there were really only 2 decks that you could draft if you wanted to win, and that there was this hidden information in the gameplay didn't get me. I wish I could do this like 6 months from now when I've got a more full picture of Kaldheim, but like Cons of Tarkir is back on flashback drafts on Moto, and I have zero interest in doing that. It's not that it was a bad set. It's just, like I said, the gameplay was fun once you knew all the rules. So we're going to go with Kaldheim here. Theros versus Triplicate Spirits. I had a really fun experience drafting. Well, actually, it wasn't drafting Core Set 2015. I got second in a PTQ. Not a PPTQ, a PTQ in Core Set 2015, and had a really good team sealed experience in Portland with KYT and Flaming Sheep. But from a draft perspective, Theros was just better. Because like Triplicate Spirits was kind of broken. I'm glad you put Triplicate Spirits here because that's all I remember from that set. Theros was just more fun. I liked the whole Tempest block. That's right, Tim. That's where we met. This was not an amazing core set. It was okay. Tempest Stronghold Exodus was all fun to draft. Battle for Zendikar versus Kaldheim, no question. I did not care for Battle for Zendikar. It was this weird thing of like, at the same time, too much on rails. Wait a minute, this is Battle for Zendikar, not Zendikar Rising. Okay. How many Zendikar sets have there been? Battle for Zendikar was okay. I still think Kaldheim has been more fun for me so far. This was the one that didn't have green cards in it. Yeah, so far I like Kaldheim better. Mirrodin Besieged versus Vintage Masters. Oh man, this is actually a tough one for me, but I think I need to go. I think I need to go with what was actually more fun to draft. I drafted Vintage Masters on Magic Online, and I had a 91% win rate. When that was out, I funded my drafting for the next 2 years playing Vintage Masters. We opened Black Lotuses and gave them away on stream because I didn't need the tickets, because I was winning so much. I don't think it was actually a good draft set because all you had to do was take the red card that let you pump tokens and all of the stupid bird cards in white, and you could win. And nobody could do anything about it. And it was forcible. 3 people at the table could do it. Whereas Mirrored and Besieged, you actually had to kind of think about your draft and have some more fun. Now, I enjoyed having a 91% win rate. I'd love to do that again, but it was less fun. So Mirrored and Besieged gets the nods here. Okay, this is the same. Like, Ixalan was terrible. I'd rather play Vintage Masters than Ixalan. I'm never going to draft Ixalan again. Something terrible has gone wrong if I'm drafting Ixalan. If somebody was like, you want to draft Vintage Masters, I might be like, what are the prizes? Because I'll get them. So yeah, Vintage Masters way better than they are. Scars of Mirrodin versus Guild of Ravnica, easy Scars of Mirrodin. Ravnica sets are terrible for drafting. If you may not initially, like, that may not initially resonate with a lot of people, but here's my thing. When I'm drafting, I like sitting down and knowing that there's 10 color pairs that I could play. And as soon as you get into Ravnica, you're limited to 5 color pairs that you can play, the way that they've done most of the modern sets. And that's just less interesting to me. It does change how you evaluate cards, and it makes gold cards not really gold cards anymore because they still go in 1 color pair, but there's less color pairs, so it's not as much of a commitment. But I've just never enjoyed cutting out half of the decks that you can play. I don't think that's interesting design space or fun. I think it's just less cards that you get to play with. So I'd rather play Scars. Oath of the Gatewatch versus Guilds of Ravnica. I mean, Oath was just bad, right? Because instead of limiting the decks you can play to 5 color pairs, it basically limited it to 1. There was literally 1 color pair you could play in Oath. It was black-white. So that Guilds has to get the nod here. Kaladesh versus Ice Age. Ice Age has a lot of member berries for me because I started playing around this time and it was one of the first sets I began drafting, but Kaladesh was just more fun. I loved taking Ice Age packs to Chaos drafts because there was going to be 1 playable removal spell in it at common. It was either Incinerate or Dark Banishing, and then just a pack full of garbage. So you could open it up, get your removal spell, and then just send trash all the way around the table. Good times, but Kaladesh was more fun. Born of the Gods versus Ice Age. Born of the Gods kind of sucked. Everything that came after the Theros set just made it actively worse. So again, if somebody's like, hey, you want to come over and draft Ice Age? I'm like, sure. Somebody's like, you want to draft Born of the Gods? I'm like, maybe I'll level a new alt. Yeah, Tribute was terrible. No thanks. Set Elementals versus Throne of Eldraine. This is one of my least favorite modern sets. This set literally made me stop playing Magic for 6 months. It's why I didn't get to play Theros Beyond Death. So a lot of people told me it was just the bots, because it was terrible with bots. But I came back and tried it again when they had people drafting, and it was on flashback, and it was just as bad. Huge power spikes in some of the cards. Like, I didn't care for it at all. I'd much rather play Core Set 2020 again than Throne. I'd rather draft... Yeah, I'd rather play this stupid old Core Set from years ago than Throne. I have no interest in playing Throne. Fate Reforged versus Shadows, no question Shadows of Innistrad was great. It had the build-arounds that the original Innistrad had, but they were deep enough that you could find them. And you could also not draft a wonky build-around strategy if you wanted to. In addition, flavor-wise, like, it was great. You've got this awesome horror setting, and now Cthulhu essentially is invading in the form of Emrakul. Like, it's just fun. This was a heyday of Magic, and a fun set. Dominaria versus Ravnica Allegiance, no question. I've talked about why I didn't like the Ravnica drafting. Like, Dominaria was just way better. This one's a little tougher, because I didn't particularly enjoy either of these sets. War of the Spark was just mechanically weird, and I didn't like planeswalkers all over the dang place, even though they were kind of just weird enchantments that your opponents could attack. I don't really want to draft either of these sets again, but I suppose if I had to, War of the Spark would be a little higher up on the list. Eldritch Moon versus Bots Don't Draft Auras. I liked Shadows over Innistrad better without Eldritch Moon added in, but Eldritch Moon was still quite fun. And it was certainly more fun than Core Set Ixalan. Journey into Nyx versus Core Set Auras. That's tough. It's really tough. We're going to take a break and do our Stream Raiders battle. And then we can think about this one for a minute. God, if somebody's like, hey, do you want to draft Core Set 2019 or Journey into Nyx? I think my answer would be nah. I'm good. Because everything that Born of the Gods did to original Theros, Journey into Nyx just diluted it even more. Adam with the kills, Planar Stalker with the assists, rewards for Orcish, Abe, Silence, Wizard, and Miklas. Yeah, be like, I'll play Rust or Super Animal Royale, or I don't know, clip my toenails? Netflix and chill? Portal can be on your list. This list is only the sets that I've personally drafted. So Portal is not on this list because I did not draft Portal. I think Journey into Nyx was a little bit better than this set because at least there were interesting mechanically things happening, but it still wasn't fun. Aether Revolt versus Gatecrash. I got a lot of good memories of Gatecrash. I was playing competitive in GPs. I was just getting started streaming when Gatecrash came out. I did very well in it, but Aether Revolt was more fun. I don't have any interest in doing a Gatecrash flashback. I might do an Aether Revolt flashback. Oh man, Avacyn Restored versus Gatecrash? It's like, do you want to drink a bottle of mayonnaise or mustard? No. But I guess if I had to choose, I have better memories of Gatecrash. I played Gatecrash for the entire time it was out. When Avacyn Restored was out, I drafted it 5 times and then just stopped drafting for 2 months. It's like, no, I'm good. So this was bad enough to get me to stop drafting. I guess Gatecrash has to be better. Tempest versus Mirage. This is not fair. I wouldn't be playing Magic if Mirage had not come out. This was the set that got me interested in Magic. So when I first started playing, I'm going to have a little bit of sim story time here. I was playing a card game called Spellfire. How many of you out there have heard of Spellfire? It was bad. It was really bad. It was a D&D based card game that involved playing lands to win. And each of the expansions that came out, it didn't have any sort of resource system like Magic did. You could just play 2 cards per turn or whatever. And to sell new cards, they just upped the power level in every set. So the way to win was literally just buy all of the cards from the new set. And yeah, it had recycled art from D&D books. Like, that's what it was. It was bad. But I played D&D and we wanted to play a card game. And I got to the point where I didn't like Spellfire and I was like, I want to play a new card game. And at the time, everybody had a card game art. I had a card game out. And I was looking at the art on the packs. And just about all of them had some sort of dragon, and then a lady posed on the dragon in a chainmail bikini. That was all of them. And Mirage had like this African-inspired art. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it like they had a staff. It's like I have to find exactly what it was. I think I saw like what looked like a tribal shaman, and then another one that I remember having Teferi's puzzle box on. That may have been from Visions. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the art on the booster interested me in the game. So I think for that, I would have to pick Mirage. I wouldn't be playing Magic if it wasn't for Mirage. It was also literally the first set ever designed to be drafted. Lol, Caravex Torch at common. But I think I have to go Mirage here, but it's close. Innistrad over Zendikar Rising. These are very similar sets once you pull out the build-arounds from Innistrad. But I'm going to go with Innistrad here. I don't think I'll ever draft Zendikar Rising again. I may draft original Innistrad again one day. It's fun to do at Halloween. Zendikar Rising versus Return to Ravnica. No thanks. But Zendikar Rising gets the nod here. I still have my issues with the Ravnica sets. Even though, again, I have really fond memories of Return to Ravnica, Zendikar Rising was at least more mechanically interesting. Dragon's Maze versus Hour of Devastation. Difficult for me, but Hour of Devastation is my favorite set. For a set to be good for me, it needs to hit on three pieces. It needs to give me an interesting draft portion, interesting gameplay decisions, and it also really helps if I like the flavor. My favorite Planeswalker is Nicol Bolas, and I love Egyptian mythology and history. So when you combine the two of those, I'm hooked on the story. The drafts were interesting, the gameplay was interesting. Kaladesh is an example of a set that didn't really get me on the story. I didn't quite understand what was happening, except like Tezzeret turned off the power company or something, but the draft was interesting and the gameplay was interesting. So even though we have fond memories of Dragon's Maze, it ain't beaten Hour of Devastation. Visions versus Dragon's Maze. Visions didn't actually add anything interesting to Mirage. It was kind of just more of the same. And I did like Dragon's Maze. Visions versus New Phyrexia. Yeah, I think the Pain Train was a mistake in Kaladesh. They didn't know what vehicles were going to do or exactly what they were, and I can forgive them for that for the first time they introduced them. I think if they went back and designed it, they would design that card to cost, I don't know, 5 mana, and then we wouldn't have complained as much. I think I would be more excited to draft New Phyrexia again, and it had good flavor, but it also just had some broken, dumb mechanics. Like the Phyrexian mana was just stupid. Yeah, but fair. Visions gets it. I liked New Phyrexia flavorfully, but it wasn't actually fun to draft. Dragons of Tarkir versus Ikoria, no problem for me here. Khans of Tarkir, this would be a tough decision. No, it wouldn't. I still liked Ikoria better. This was fun, and it made the gym printer go burr. This was the set I came back to Magic with, and it was a lot of fun. Bloodthirst and Titans versus Stronghold, easy. Stronghold, clearly a winner here. This was mechanically interesting. You had to balance multiple types of evasion between shadow creatures and flying creatures. We had pingers back in those days too. Whereas this was just like, did you open a Titan? Haha. Origins versus Core Set 2012. Oh, God. This was, okay, at least in Core Set 2012, you weren't teaching new players to chump block. That was my biggest complaint about Magic Origins. The Renown mechanic snowballed so fast and was so punishing that if that was the first set you played, you would think that you might need to start chump blocking at 20 life just so somebody didn't get a Renown trigger. And that was just not an interesting or fun gameplay pattern. Oh, my opponent's on the play, and they got a 2/2 that grows if it hits me. No, not interesting or fun. I'd rather draft an old core set than Magic Origins again. Kaldheim versus Amonkhet. It's too early for me to say. I have very fond memories of Amonkhet. The flavor obviously got me. I remember when I did my set review and everyone else did their set review, we talked about how Amonkhet was going to be this grindy, slow format, and we were all wrong. However, you could do that. You could draft a control deck in Amonkhet. I'm excited about Kaldheim now because it's new, but I think as the dust settles over time, I will have fonder memories of Emmencat than I did Kaldheim. Because I want to see how I feel about Kaldheim after I've drafted it for 3 months instead of after I've drafted it for 2 weeks. But I think I'm going to have to go with Emmencat here. The flavor was good. The gameplay was good. You could draft control decks. It's good. Exodus versus Theros. Original Theros was doing a lot more than Exodus was adding to Tempest. That set just got diluted by the time you got to Exodus and was no longer fun, whereas original Theros I quite enjoyed. I think Theros was a great example of why we got away from the block structure, because Triple Theros was quite fun to draft. But once you started adding in the other sets to it, it became significantly less fun. Exodus versus Triplicate Spirits. I really think Exodus wasn't adding that much, but this set was actively bad. I got to back that one up. I'd rather draft Exodus again than Triplicate Spirits. I did really well in the set. I have a lot of fond memories from it, but a lot of it was just opening a Triplicate Spirits and then getting past one. It wasn't fun. The Looter Mill set versus the Triplicate Spirits set. So y'all help me out. Core set 2021, was that the one that had the was that the most recent one we've played? Where I was drafting the blue-black and doing okay with it? I'd rather draft that again than the Triplicate Spirits. I had fun with, Tutelage, Protege. I had more fun with that one than I did this one. There were no Ruined Crabs in Core Set 2021. It had Shrines, which weren't particularly good, but it had Roaming Ghostlight. I was able to mill myself out completely and then recycle the cards that I wanted with an Epitaph Golem. That was fun too. So this core set gets the nod over that one. Kaldheim versus Mirrodin Besieged. I think I like Kaldheim better. This was when I came back to Magic after a long break and hadn't drafted in a while. But Kaldheim is like, if somebody was like, do you want to go do a Mirrodin Besiege flashback? I'd be like, nah, I'm good. And I think I might be interested in drafting Kaldheim again one day. Mirrodin Besiege versus Battle for Zendikar. I think I didn't like any of the Zendikar sets. Because at least Mirrodin Besieged had 5 colors. Battle for Zendikar only had 4. And colorless, but you couldn't play green. Like, how is a set fun if there's a trap there? Like, say you've never drafted Battle for Zendikar and you really like green, so you usually default to drafting green if you see good green cards, and you see what you think are good green cards. You're like, hey, there's a 4/3 for 3 and a green. That's usually a pretty good stat line, but it's not. It's actively bad, and if you're playing it, you're just going to lose. Nah. Vintage Masters versus Battle for Zendikar? All right, well, by my same argument, that means that Battle for Zendikar has to be better, because there were only 2 colors in Vintage Masters, red and white. So, okay, Battle for Zendikar gets the nod here. Vintage Masters versus Weatherlight? Oh, man. Good morning, Techno Shaman. So this is a personal preference. I will never draft Weatherlight again. That set was terrible. I didn't enjoy it. It ruined the flavor of a great set. It set Magic's story on a course that made it just incredibly boring to me. And eventually led us to the, like, all right, I need some sim olds in chat. Back in my day, Magic was a game where you visited a new plane and you got to know the people on that plane, the culture of that plane, the things that made that plane interesting. And then it was all left behind and you went to a new one and you got to learn about new people, new cultures, new stories that weren't really connected to the other one other than loosely. And if you wanted that connection, you could go into the novels and it was fine. But Weatherlight started this idea that the cards should tell a story. and that it should follow the same group of characters throughout multiple planes as they traveled through them. Weatherlight is what led us to Planeswalkers, which I find kind of boring. Like, why can't the cool dude or dudette from Mirage just be a cool character? Why do they have to have godlike powers or be able to, like, teleport and stuff? I don't know. Like, I would draft Vintage Masters again if there was a prize I wanted, because I'd probably win it. It's the highest win percentage I've ever had in Magic. Whereas Weatherlight, I didn't enjoy the draft, and I really hated hearing about Gerard and Squee for the next 8 years. So Vintage Masters for me. Oh, we have reached the bottom of the barrel. I can now express to you how much I disliked Weatherlight. Because I'd rather draft Ixalan again than Weatherlight. Ixalan at least had cool Halloween costumes. I actually think that's how the set was developed, is they asked 4 children what they wanted to be for Halloween. Like, I want to be a vampire. I'm going to be a dinosaur. Roar! I'm going to be a pirate. Arr! I want to be a mermaid. Like, okay, make that into a Magic set. And I'd rather play that again than Weatherlight. This just ruined Magic forever. Legacy is ruined, and Magic is dead. Kaladesh versus Scars. I think I'm going with Kaladesh again here. The draft was interesting. The gameplay was interesting. Yes, Pain Train was a mistake, but it was the first time they'd ever designed vehicles. So Kaladesh it is for me. Ice Age versus Scars. Yeah, Magic is dead. Long live Magic. I gotta admit that Scars was more fun to draft. It really was. Like, Ice Age, I think, had... Well, it has some nostalgia for me. I drafted Ice Age. A lot. But it wasn't designed to be drafted, and you could tell. And a lot of the cards were clunky. Scars was just a better experience. Again, let's say somebody's like, hey, dude, I've got booster boxes of Guilds of Ravnica. You want to come over and draft? I'm like, no, man. I'm busy. I'm going to read the ingredients on my Canada Dry. But if somebody's like, you want to come over and draft Ice Age? I'd go do that. Board of the Gods versus Guilds of Ravnica. I really don't like Ravnica sets. They're all bad. Welcome to Ravnica, where you can't draft 5 color pairs. Have fun. Hey, Scotty. I'd rather draft Born of the Gods again than Guilds of Ravnica. Elementals versus Shadows, no question here. Shadows was better than every core set we've ever had. This was another one where I had an absurd win rate. Loved the flavor. Shadows over Innistrad was 5,000 times better than the original Innistrad just because of longevity. Like, Innistrad was fun for 3 weeks, and then everybody figured everything out and it wasn't fun anymore. Shadows, the last draft I did of Shadows, was probably more fun than the first draft I did of Shadows. I would draft that again in a heartbeat. Fate Reforged versus the core set of Elementals. I think the sets that came after Cons were worse. Fate Reforged was kind of messing up Cons, but I'd still rather play that than a core set. The Exalted core set versus the Elementals core set. Again, a lot of good memories about this. I don't think I don't think that the podcast that I was on for so long would exist without this core set, but it wasn't as much fun as the Elemental one. Slivers in Draft Blue, yeah, that one was boring too. That set was just incredibly slow. I like a slow set, but not one where like you should be taking 5 opportunities and worried about decking yourself. That's a bit too slow for me. Dominaria versus Eldritch Moon, easy Eldritch Moon for me. I still would argue that a lot of people liked Dominaria just because it came after Ixalan, and Ixalan was bad. Journey into Nyx versus Dominaria, easy Dominaria. Again, all the sets that came after Theros just made it worse. I'd rather draft War of the Spark again than Journey into Nyx. Like, once Theros got to this, you were so tired of Theros as a plane, and it was so diluted that it felt like you were just drafting a bad Chaos draft. Whereas at least War of the Spark had some themes, even though I think they whiffed a little bit. Ravnica Allegiance versus Journey. Well, there you go. I'd rather do a bad Chaos draft than draft Ravnica Allegiance again. Core set Ixalan versus Ravnica Allegiance. You got it. Rivals of Ixalan versus Ravnica Allegiance. Okay. This is the only spot where I would rather draft a Ravnica set, but I'd rather not draft either. Mirage versus Aether Revolt. Again, I would not be playing Magic without Mirage. I don't think Aether Revolt made Kaladesh that much more interesting. Tempest versus Aether Revolt, same. Tempest was revolutionary. Aether Revolt was like, let's mess up your Kaladesh drafts a little bit. Dark Ascension versus Aether Revolt. These are actually really good comparisons, in my opinion. So, like, original Innistrad came out. Tamo! Thank you for the resub. Y'all spam some cats for Tamo. Thank you very much. We will have many cats spammed. So I think this is like a really good, like, pseudo-history lesson, if you will. Because both of these were second sets. So you had Innistrad come out that was amazing fun for 3 to 6 weeks. Then everything was figured out and it wasn't fun anymore. And then Dark Ascension came out and kind of revitalized that draft set. Because now all of a sudden you had tribal lords and different build-arounds you could get into. And it made the set fun again. Whereas Aether Revolt came out and I felt like Kaladesh was still fun. Aether Revolt came out and just kind of messed it up. So I think I'm going to go with Dark Ascension here over Aether Revolt, because it kind of fixed the problems with the original set once everybody had figured out the gimmicks. Hour of Devastation over Innistrad. This is easy. This set got boring after a little bit. I would be drafting Hour of Devastation right now if I could be. Dragon's Maze over Innistrad. Again, I have strong memories of Dragon's Maze and enjoyed it, but at least the original Innistrad had some flavor that made sense. What was the story of Dragon's Maze? The guilds are falling apart because of something, and Niv Mizzet made a maze, and if somebody gets through it, something Jace. What? So I'll go with Innistrad, because I'd rather draft that again than Dragon's Maze. Dragon's Maze versus Zendikar Rising. There you go, Dragon's Maze. This did at least reward you for being aware of what was in the different packs. Visions versus Zendikar Rising, no problem. Visions easy. New Phyrexia versus Zendikar Rising. New Phyrexia flavor-wise is one of my favorite things that's ever happened to Magic. Because Magic sets would typically go in a block story. So the first block, there would be 3 blocks. The first one would be, here's a new and interesting plane. The second block would be, here's terrifying bad guys that are invading. And the third block would be, here's the good guys winning. And this one looked like it was going to be that, except in the end it was like, and the bad guys won. And that was really cool story-wise. But Phyrexian mana was stupid. And having to balance your creatures between infect and non-infect creatures was also stupid. It didn't make for interesting drafts. I think Zendikar Rising was a better draft format, even though it was just, like, I still don't understand what was happening story-wise, but I don't need to. New Phyrexia versus Return to Ravnica. Yeah, I'd rather draft New Phyrexia. All of the problems that this had, at least you could play all 10 color pairs. Stronghold versus Ikoria. Easy Ikoria for me. This is where the gem printer began going burr. Lots of fun decks that you could draft. Mutate was interesting. Like, you never got blown out if somebody killed your Mutate creature, but you were always 2-for-1ing yourself when you mutated, so you had some interesting decisions to make there, whereas Stronghold didn't add anything unique to Tempest. Nahiri is trying to mess stuff up. How or why is that unclear? I don't know what her motivations are and don't particularly care. Sure, she went nuts. Okay. So the whole story is somebody got trapped and is now crazy. There's machines invading from another plane that want to assimilate you. Or there's this person who went crazy and is doing unrecognizably bad things. One of these is more compelling to me. Stronghold versus Dragons of Tarkir. I think I'd rather do a Dragons draft again. This is a very high power level set and very swingy. It was not everyone's favorite draft format. But I still don't think Stronghold was doing anything different. And say what you want, Dragons of Tarkir was very different from Khans of Tarkir. I think it was more fun. I'd rather do a Dragons draft than a Stronghold draft. And I'd rather do anything than Modern Masters 1. Because this was just like the epitome, the epitome, if you will, of drafting on rails. Where, okay, every color pair has something that it's supposed to be doing, and if you're not doing that, you can't. You have to do that. It was not fun. You know what I think Modern Masters actually was? I think it was a draft set designed for people who don't like draft. A book about swordplay, the EP tome. I like it. I think this was the beginning of a series of draft sets that were designed for people who don't actually like draft. So rather than trying to like be creative and draft a deck as they're playing, they just get into a color pair and then do what that color pair does. So if you're a constructed player, Modern Masters was probably a fun draft experience. But if you're a drafter, you're like, I don't want to be this on rails. And what I mean by that is like, once you got into blue-white, there were cards that only went in the blue-white deck. There were white cards that only went in that deck, and blue cards that only went in that deck. And literally no one else wanted them. You didn't have to worry about the black-white player wanting any of the same white cards you did. So once you knew what color pair you were, you just clicked the card that went in your deck in every pack. And the only question was, how good a version of this do I get? So I'd rather draft Stronghold. Same thing with this, the Bloodthirsting Titans. At least it was a draft set. It wasn't a great one, but it felt like I was drafting. God, I hate to say it, but same thing with Magic Origins. I really hated the Modern Masters series. Literally all of them. I didn't like it. I didn't particularly love Origins either. It was way too aggressive for me. And Renown was just a really punishing snowball mechanic. But I'd rather draft Origins again than Modern Masters. Amonkhet versus Theros. I think there were more decks that you could draft in Theros, but I feel like the gameplay was more fun to me in Amonkhet. Because Theros was kind of about building battlecruiser magic that you'd make one creature and then make it super tall and swing out. Or about getting lucky and getting, 3 gray merchants in your deck. Whereas Amonkhet kind of had different decks. It felt to an extent like all of the decks in Theros were sort of trying to do the same thing, which I didn't particularly care for. So I'm going to go with Amonkhet here. Theros versus Kaldheim. I think I'd be on Kaldheim. Yeah, John got me into this. I didn't realize it would take this long, but I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. And now I'm able to give you the definitive draft tier ranking so that you'll know what the best sets in Magic ever were. Again, so far, it's very new to Kaldheim, but so far, Kaldheim seems like I can do more things. I think we're exactly halfway there versus this progress bar. We'll eventually get to where these are easy picks. I'd rather play Khans over Theros. Kaldheim versus Kaladesh. I wish I'd had longer to play Kaldheim to make this decision, but Kaldheim seems to be hitting flavorfully and mechanically for me, whereas Kaladesh only hit mechanically and had some busted vehicles. So I think I like Kaldheim better. Mirrodin Besieged versus Kaladesh, easy Kaladesh for me. Energy was fun. You could do aggro decks, you could do machine decks, you could do whatever you wanted. My only complaint about it was I don't understand what was happening, and the Pain Train was obviously a mistake. Scars versus Mirrodin, I think the first set was actually better. And I think this is another argument for why we don't do blocks anymore, but I'd rather play Scars than Besieged. Ice Age versus Mirrodin. Again, Ice Age was fun for me to draft a long time ago, but I don't think I'd want to go back and do it. But to be fair, I would never draft. No one's ever going to be like, let's draft Mirrodin Besieged. Whereas Ice Age is at least a fun gimmick. Yeah, Ice Age gets the nod there. I don't like second sets. And now they're going to force me to choose between two second sets. Born of the Gods ruined Theros. Mirrodin Besieged at least kept things going from Scars. Big oof, but we'll take Mirrodin Besieged. Battle for Zendikar versus Born of the Gods. I'd still rather play Battle for Zendikar, even though it was missing a color. Vintage Masters versus Born of the Gods. Again, taking my win percentage out, I'd rather draft a set that at least has 5 colors than a set that only has 2. And same thing, I have to admit that Guilds of Ravnica was a better draft format, even though I didn't particularly love it. Oath of the Gatewatch over Vintage Masters. Those are essentially the same decision. How have I been babbling about cards for 30 minutes? I thought this is something that would take 5 minutes. I was trapped. That's essentially the same decision, because Oath of the Gatewatch, you could only draft black-white. Vintage Masters, you could only draft red-white. So I have to go to which one did I win more, and it was Vintage Masters. I guess I do. I love this Amonkhet board on Stream Raiders. A lot of turkeys on the battlefield, too. Fasty Dave with the kills. My favorite person, Simwife with the assists. Rewards for Wizard, Artillery, Stalker, and Abe. How long did it take you to do this, John? So I'll go with Vintage Masters here. At least I won a lot with that. Ixalan versus Oath. I'd rather draft Ixalan again. Because Oath was just forced black-white. Like, it didn't even matter. It didn't matter what you opened. You just forced black-white. Literally every time. Weatherlight versus Oath? Okay, fine, you got me. I'd rather force black-white than look at Gerard on 500 Magic cards. And then draft Visions and Mirage and be like, why couldn't we have just done that and left this out? This didn't even fit in with the story, was the worst part. You had Mirage and Visions, which were like a package deal in telling a story. And then like, oh, forget all that. Here's these new people. And we're only going to talk about them for the next 8 years. Oh, God. Shadows versus Eldritch Moon. Shadows was better without Eldritch Moon. Eldritch Moon was fun, but Shadows was better without it. So that's an easy pick for me. Fate Reforged versus Eldritch Moon is another easy pick. Eldritch Moon was just more fun. Fate Reforged was kind of messing up Khans of Tarkir, whereas Eldritch Moon added to what you got in Shadows, and it was quite fun. Fate Reforged versus Dominaria. I'd rather play Dominaria. Fate Reforged versus War of the Spark. Now you got me. I didn't like bad enchantments, planeswalkers. Ugh. I'd rather play Fate Reforged. War of Spark versus Elementals. I'd rather play the core set. Again, I'd rather play the core set. I'd really rather play the core set, even though this one was slow and bad. Okay, you got me. I'd rather play War of the Spark than Throne of Eldraine. I'd rather play Journey into Nyx than Throne of Eldraine. I'd rather play Core Set Bots Don't Draft Auras than Throne of Eldraine. I'd rather play Ravnica Allegiance than Throne of Eldraine. This made me quit playing Magic for 6 months. This set came out, I drafted it for 3 weeks, and then I posted in my Discord that I'm not playing Magic ever again. I never want to draft this set again. So, yep, rather play Rivals. Mirage versus Hour of Devastation. Unfair, but Hour wins. Mirage versus Innistrad. I'd rather play Mirage. Because this was fun after 500 drafts, and this was incredibly fun for 50, and then not fun after that. I tried it in Best of 1 with humans, and it was still terrible. It did have to do with the bots. So when it came out, I drafted it in a flashback, and it was still terrible. Tempest over Innistrad? I think Tempest was unique and fun for the whole time it was out. I'd rather play Tempest than Innistrad. And I think Dark Ascension added more to Innistrad than it took away. Whereas Aether Revolt ruined Kaladesh. Yeah, I'd rather draft Innistrad again than Aether Revolt. And I'd rather draft Dragon's Maze again than Aether Revolt. This is getting easier. I'd certainly rather draft Visions than Aether Revolt. But I might be more interested in Aether Revolt than going back and revisiting Zendikar Rising. Some of this may be bias because this was out for longer than any other Magic set, and I got sick of it. But I never figured out what to do to get consistent wins. I could never figure out what was open. The party mechanic, it felt like it was punishing me for not drawing my cards in the right order instead of rewarding me for building a deck around the mechanic. I didn't like it. I'd rather play Aether Revolt. Okay, fine. It's still better than Ravnica sets. And New Phyrexia was certainly better than Ravnica sets. What's up, Timber? Return to Ravnica versus Gatecrash. Okay, here we go with the same problem, but at least in Return to Ravnica, there were 5-color shenanigans and the 5 guilds, where in Gatecrash, you could realistically only draft Orzhov or Boros. That was it. So I'd rather play Return to Ravnica. Amonkhet versus Ikoria. I liked Ikoria better. Amonkhet was better flavorfully. I still don't really understand what was happening on Ikoria except there was Godzilla. But Amonkhet versus Dragons, easy Amonkhet. Kaldheim versus Dragons. So far, I think it's Kaldheim. Dragons was fun, but it was a power level I didn't care for. This versus Khans would be a tough choice for me, but not Dragons. Khans was better than Dragons. Easy. Theros versus Dragons? I'd rather play Theros. Tempest Stronghold Exodus versus Dragons. Exodus didn't do anything. Tempest was great. Exodus advanced the story, but wasn't all that fun mechanically. I'm sorry, Timber. I hope you feel better. The third set was bad. I liked Tempest and Stronghold better. Yeah, I even liked a medium core set that people forget over Exodus. But I'd still rather play Exodus than Origins, which was, I think there's a quote in there somewhere about Magic Origins being a heavy synergy format because it was the synergy of having 2 drops in your deck. Not for me. This was a way better core set than Origins. So was this. At least you could get longer games. Kaldheim versus Shadows. God, even right now, if Arena was like, we're doing Shadows over Innistrad, I would play it instead of Kaldheim. Shadows was great. I think I might like Kaldheim better than Eldritch Moon, though. Oh, who cares about that? The Godzilla cards were funny. I thought they were cool. You didn't have to use the styles. I liked them. I think I liked Kaldheim better than Eldritch Moon, but this may just be because it's new. Because Moon was fun, but I'm liking Kaldheim better so far. Kaladesh versus Moon? I think I liked Kaladesh better. I'm gonna get some hate for this. Because there was some very strict delineation of what the color pairs were supposed to be doing, and you had to do that in Eldritch Moon. Whereas in Kaladesh, it was like you could just draft creatures in a curve, you could go deep on a synergy, which was usually the energy synergy. It's a very high powered set, which I didn't particularly care for. But I think I had more fun with Kaladesh than I did Eldritch Moon. It was better than Scars, though, easily. Dominaria was probably better than Scars, too. But I'd rather play Scars than Fate Reforged. I guess it depends on what we're drafting it with. Because if we're drafting Fate Reforged with Cons, that was better than Fate Reforged with Dragons. So maybe Fate Reforged does get the nod. Core Set 2020 was better than Scars. Although this, I'd rather draft Scars than that stupid Exalted set. Even though, again, I have fond memories of getting involved in content creation in 2013, specifically with that set. I drafted Ice Age and I like it, but it wasn't a good draft set. Yeah, still wasn't a good draft set. Still wasn't a good draft set. But Journey into Nyx really ruined things, but it was still better than just a bad draft set. Yep. Sorry, Ice Age. Oh, this hurts. Oh, this so hurts. But we've got to kill Ice Age. Well, there we go. Here's the one set I would certainly rather draft Ice Age over. That's an easy decision. Sorry, Throne. I can't imagine what's going to appear here. Yeah, Born of the Gods is way better than Throne. Guilds of Ravnica, give it to me. Certainly give me Vintage Masters. Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh, this one hurts because I have to click Throne and I don't want to. But realistically, if I had to draft one of these formats, I would rather draft Throne. You got me. How do you choose between your two babies? I liked both of these so much. This is the exact opposite choice. It's like if someone says, do you want to draft a Courier Hour of Devastation? My answer is yes. I think I liked Hour of Devastation better. Mechanically, I enjoyed both of these sets, but realistically, one of the reasons I liked Ikoria so much was because I metagamed it. As soon as the LSV came out and said that Offspring's Revenge was a bad card and people wouldn't take it, I could count on seeing one in a draft, and that's how we turned 18,000 gems into 80,000 gems. But for most of that, I was drafting a very similar deck. I think I was Mardu and Ikoria about 8 out of 10 drafts. Where in Hour of Devastation, I was multicolor green about 5 out of 10 drafts, but I still played all of the other color pairs. You could do green-white aggro things. You could do blue-red spell things. You didn't have to, but you could. And I liked that. So I think Hour of Devastation was actually more fun for me over time, even though I have very fond memories of Ikoria. But that's a difficult decision. Ikoria was more fun than Mirage. That one's easy. This got me into the game. This got me back into the game. Mirage versus Amonkhet. I'd rather play Amonkhet. even though I quite enjoyed Mirage. All right, so let's be real. Right now, someone says we're doing Mirage flashbacks on Magic Online. Right now, I might reboot Magic Online. Right now, Magic Online is uninstalled from my computer, but I might reinstall it for actual Mirage flashbacks. Mirage flashbacks at a reason, Phantom Mirage flashbacks with a decent payout. I'd just play that all day. I think that would be better than Kaldheim. Tempest was a very unique set, and I liked a lot of what it did. But I think even 6 months from now, I'll have fonder memories of Kaldheim than I do Tempest. Cons versus Tempest? Yeah, Cons was better. The gameplay in Cons, we've talked about this because we've talked about Cons before, but the gameplay was some of the best I've ever had once you knew the rules. Theros versus Tempest, Tempest was more fun. It's a very different time comparatively, but Tempest was more fun. Theros versus Dark Ascension. Dark Ascension saved Innistrad block, but I kind of don't want any of it. I'd rather just draft Theros again. Dragons of Tarkir versus Dark Ascension. Again, these were both fun sets, but Dark Ascension came after a set that needed fixing and it fixed it, and Dragons came after a set that didn't need fixing and you couldn't even play the old set anymore. I'd rather play Dark Ascension. Dragons versus Innistrad. I'd rather play Innistrad. Maybe you're drafting it with a bunch of new people who don't know about the build-arounds. Dragon's Maze versus Dragons of Tarkir. Again, the Ravnica Curse gets this one. Rather play Dragons. Stronghold versus Dragon's Maze. Rather play Stronghold. Stupid core set with Titans versus Dragon's Maze. I'd rather play Dragon's Maze there. Vision's easy. It fit right into Mirage. Aether Revolt was better than a core set. I'll at least give it that. I really didn't like Zendikar Rising. The fact that I'm even thinking about this means I should just collect the core set. I didn't play Time Spiral. I wasn't playing Magic when Time Spiral came out. I tried to play it once on a flashback. Had no idea what the cards did. There were too many mechanics, and I lost interest. So I think Time Spiral is something that a lot of people who played at the time have very fond memories of, but someone who didn't play it is going to have a really hard time getting into that. I'd rather play Zendikar Rising than Exodus, though. I'll give it that. Certainly rather play New Phyrexia. I think I'd rather play Return to Ravnica too. This was another third set problem where Exodus just wasn't adding anything to Tempest and Stronghold. Yeah, good God, I'd rather play Gatecrash than Exodus. I really didn't like Exodus, but I liked it better than Avacyn Restored. I liked this core set better than Avacyn Restored. I liked Triplicate Spirits better than Avacyn Restored. Oh, I liked Magic Origins better than Avacyn Restored. Ooh. I think I liked Avacyn Restored better than Modern Masters, because I drafted this 5 times and stopped. I think I drafted this twice and stopped. Easy. Shadows was great, but Hour was better. There were more decks. Oh, my babies. I think, again, realistically, Shadows was better than Ikoria. Michael, thank you for the resub.
Ranking engine hype.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be something we'd do for fun for 5 minutes. It's taken like an hour. But this is our YouTube content for the day. We're good. And we've got a huge draft showdown coming up. I think Shadows was better than Ikoria, even though I have fond memories of Ikoria. I think I liked Ikoria better than Kaldheim, though. I certainly liked Amonkhet better. I think this is just a better design draft set than Mirage. Fireball was a common in Mirage, let's be real. Same with Kaladesh. Okay, I see where this is going. Same with Eldritch Moon. Same with Dominaria. I'm sorry, Mirage. But I had Fate Reforged, no thanks. That was a weird bridge between two formats that were good, but both of them would be better if this set had never been printed, and you just did triple cons and then triple dragons. Kaldheim was certainly better than that too. So certainly was cons. So was Tempest. So was Theros. Again, this was a second set that fixed its set, where this was a second set that kind of ruined it. And this was the set that needed fixing, but sold. I'd rather draft Innistrad. Dragons was better without Fate Reforged. And Stronghold was a better second set than Fate Reforged was. Yeah, I would be excited about drafting Dragon's Mage. I would not be excited about drafting... I'd rather draft either of the formats that this bridged without it. Same with Visions. Same with Aether Revolt. Yeah, Corset's better than that. Zendikar Rising was better than that. New Phyrexia was better than that. I think Return to Ravnica was better than that. But Gatecrash wasn't. There were just not enough decks to draft. Elemental Set was better than Gatecrash. Scars was better than Gatecrash. The Exalted Set was better than Gatecrash. That core set, God, this is two big extremes. This is one of the fastest formats Magic has ever had versus one of the slowest formats Magic has ever had. They both hedged out other color pairs. But I'd rather play this old core set than Gatecrash. I think I'd rather play War of the Spark than Gatecrash too. But Gatecrash was better than just butchering Theros. So which was better, butchering Tempest or butchering Theros? I guess butchering Tempest. The Looter Mill set was way better than that. I had fun with this. Same with Triplicate Spirits. Although it was at least better than Magic Origins. That's not saying much. God, this set was more fun to play, even though it was mechanically less interesting. It was. Yeah, I'd rather draft Allegiance than Origins. I really didn't like that. Rivals of Ixalan versus Magic Origins. So do you want to get run over by 2-drops or run over by bombs? I guess at least these drafts were over quicker because you died faster. Oh man, we're getting to the bottom of the barrel here. I stopped drafting in this set. I didn't stop drafting in this set. So rival me. Yeah, I'd way rather draft Ice Age. At least that's gotten us... Yep. Keep them coming. Oh yeah, Battle for Zendikar was better. I played for that. Born of the Gods was better. Guilds of Ravnica was better. Vintage Masters was better. Ixalan was better. Oath of the Gatewatch was better. Okay. So when I stopped drafting Avacyn Restored, I started playing Standard. When I stopped drafting Throne of Eldraine, I started playing Dota Underlords. One of these was bad enough that I quit drafting. The other was bad enough that I quit playing Magic. So Avacyn has to win there. Again, I drafted this twice and then just went to playing something else. This has to be better than Throne. So now we know. Here's my list. The best draft formats we've ever seen. Top 10 in order. I don't know how Kaldheim is on here twice, but it is. Our Hour of Devastation, Shadows over Innistrad, Ikoria, Emmencat, Kaldheim, Kaladesh, Eldritch Moon, Dominaria, Mirage. The worst draft formats ever were Ixalan, Oath of the Gatewatch, Avacyn Restored, Modern Masters 1, Throne of Eldraine, and Weatherlight. Forgettable sets in the middle were nearly every core set, which is not surprising anybody. Zendikar Rising comes in at number 22. That sounds about right. It's right there with all of the forgettable core sets. Yeah, I'm surprised that Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan aren't closer, but I can believe it. And it seems weird to me that a set that literally paid for my drafting for years and years and years was this low, but I don't think I actually enjoyed it. I just liked winning. So there's our YouTube content for the day. You now know the best draft formats that have ever existed. Where did Throne of Eldraine come in? A little bit better than Weatherlight. That seems reasonable to me too. So YouTubers, thank you for tuning in today for the definitive draft tier list. If you'd like to watch nonsense like this or drafting live, you can do so at www.twitch.tv/Semulin. Chat, say goodbye to YouTube. Let's do a draft.